There we go.
Perfect. All right. Let's see. So I think everybody here knows who everybody is. Yeah, I think nobody new here today. So.
Does everybody know Missy?
Oh, you know what? I just assumed everybody knew her.
I don't, so.
Missy, you want to?
I'm the district behavior specialist.
Mhm. Good. All right. And we have a couple other people on here. So maybe they'll join in on some of the discussion. Who knows? But we're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of the March 22nd to 2021 minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
All right. And I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was easy. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol, Amy, and Missy, who are going to talk about the behavioral supports and give us an update on behavioral supports and talk a little bit about QBS.
All right, let's get started. So we thought it would be a great idea. Let me get started here. To share with you sort of where we are 2021 school year in the area of behavior. We wanted to talk about QBS and RBT. It's been a long year, we can all see. We're happy that all students are able to return if families choose so. So we wanted to go over, again, some of our supports that we currently do have in here. So Amy, Missy, and myself will be sharing some updated information. I will ask you, please stop us if there's anything more questions, clarifications, and I'll get started. So we all know the last 13 months, I think we can all say it truly takes a village to support our students. And we wanted to share with you some of the current supports we've really had in place for the full school year, and then we'll get into a little more detail as to who they are and what they actually do. So we have Missy here. Missy is our district behavior specialist. She's been working with us for a number of years. And Missy supports all of our students in need of behavioral support throughout the district. We also, for the 2021 school year, we have contracted service, or we have services with the MCIU. His name is Matt Hook, and he works here 0.5 or half of the week each week as our BCBA. And then when we get to that information, I can share sort of his duties that he's been doing. We've also been working all year with our baton consultants with the Autism Initiative. And that is, we have 6 programs, our K-8 autistic support programs, as well as our high school MDS support program. So they have been supporting our teachers. Amy is our internal consultant, so she closely works with the consultants as well as the teachers. And then the MCIU, we have been working with, her name is Karen Stover Perry, and she is a project consultant for the MCIU. She's also works with our 3 elementary schools for the PBS. She's the facilitator and supports them. And then obviously, we have been and continue to work with our teachers very closely, monthly for our group meetings, as well as our one-to-one meetings. So to get a little bit more specific with some of the supports that we've had in the area of behavior internally and then externally. So again, Missy is our district-wide behavior specialist supporting. I will say in general, Missy might be able to talk a little bit more about that. A large majority of her time this school year has been spent at the K-5 area, but obviously if there are needs based at the middle school or high school, she is available and does support the teachers there as well. Missy is also our district-wide QBS trainer, and she'll be talking about that, what that entails. And then at the very end, we'll be talking about some next steps, some things that we're thinking of. Matt Hook, our BCBA.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me QBS, what it is?
So it's our
safety.
It's safety care. So it teaches us de-escalation strategies, and then also if we need to go into physical restraints.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get
acronyms.
And
yeah,
Missy
I'll go into
get
detail of what it looks like and what I teach the staff.
And then we have, so Matt, our 0.5 BCBA is also our RBT supervisor. So we have we'll share information as to where we are, the number and location of our current RBTs and next steps for that as well. So, Matt also consistently will consult with Missy, and they collaborate, they work out their schedules, and they'll share them with us, supporting students consistently throughout the week. And then externally, as we did talk about, the Patan consultants. So that is really it's very ABA based, or applied behavior analysis. They do support consultations with our teachers monthly. Prior to 2021 school year, I will tell you that the Patan consultants, every single monthly visit would be face-to-face and in person, where they actually are working and supporting the teachers, paraprofessionals, and the students directly there. Obviously, for this school year, it's been done virtually. However, we are fortunate this month, they're starting to do in person at one of our buildings, which is Hereford. So that is really great. And then Amy will be able to share a little bit more as she kind of goes over some of the professional development. Again, we shared the programs that they are supporting. I will also say, so basically, how do we get these supports? We need to submit an application annually to Patan. Last June, submitted an application with a lot of information and details in regards to these 6 particular programs. They accepted them, and that's where we get the supports from. I will share with you now. In June, I will submit another application for those same programs, so they'll continue into their 2nd year of support. You can continue for years with that. Typically, it is at least 2 years, generally 3 years, where they'll provide the supports to our teachers, paraprofessionals, and students. And then the MCIU, we continue to work with them and have been. Again, Amy will talk a little bit next about what that professional development has really looked like this year. And those supports have been for our RBTs. Missy has joined those sessions, as well as all of our guidance counselors and student assistance counselors and all of our K-12 special ed teachers. So there's been a lot of supports provided in those areas of functional behavior assessments, or one of the many acronyms we use, FBAs, and then positive behavior support plans, or PBSPs. And if there's no questions there, Amy will get a little more in depth about this.
So as Carol has mentioned, we have provided quite a bit of professional development for our staff this school year. Special education teachers, counselors, RBTs, our paraprofessionals, provided by ongoing, obviously, Missy is a huge part of that, and we support that. But we've also had the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit come in. They provided 3 professional development training days this year. 2 of them, I think, were mostly related to just MTSS and just behavior supports and what that looks like. And then, as Carol mentioned, going into the development of a functional behavior assessment and positive behavioral support plans, which would be done by special education teachers, but also other individuals as appropriate in the school district. Recently, we had a professional development de-escalation strategies session for the 4-5 Center. And this is something that's really nice with having Missy here as well. When there's a need in a building or in classrooms, we can tailor, how we address that to the needs of the staff in the building. So we were able to do that recently at the 4-5 Center. Carol also mentioned that we are working with 2 individuals from Patan, the Autism Initiative. They are supporting our autistic support students, implementing the verbal behavior approach K-8, and then at the MDS class at the high school. And they've been phenomenal as well. Ongoing support, consultation, observation with our teachers. I work closely with them. In addition to their monthly consultation with teachers, they've been able to provide professional development tailored to us, per the things that we feel that we need more assistance with. And they actually will be, and I think this has been mentioned multiple times, conducting a parent training for us on May 6th, 12 to 1 and 5:30 to 6:30. And we obviously are looking to continue working with them, through the remainder of the school year into next school year.
And just to add, so to what Amy was saying about the 4 or 5 center, I think it's important to note that this was not geared, this professional development, it was not just geared towards special ed teachers. This was geared to all teachers at the 4 or 5, which excuse me, I think is really important. It was gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, and it was presented by Missy, our student assistance counselor, Amanda Jager, as well as the guidance counselor from the building there, Sue Kenna. So I just think it's important to note it wasn't just a special education support, it was for everybody there. And I think there was one more thing. I wasn't sure if anybody had questions or needed clarification, just generally in regards to the FBA or PBSP. You don't need, you're good? We're good? Okay. And the
It's a lot
goal
to
of
take
that.
in. Sorry, it's a lot to take in.
And the goal of, I will just say, the goal of those trainings is really moving forward for our teachers and guidance counselors for students that may not receive special ed services, if it's determined through that MTSS process from the data observed that there may be a need for a functional behavior assessment. Part of this training is to train those staff in developing that currently, and then developing, if there are identified behaviors of concern, to develop then the positive behavior support plan. Currently at this point, Missy has really been working and developing those FBAs within the district and the PBSPs.
Okay, so QBS, which is safety care. So this is the strategies that we teach our staff to help prevent crises. So it is designed to offer strategies that allow the staff to safely provide support to individuals who may exhibit some disruptive or dangerous behaviors. The principles of safety care is that we always want to teach respect and dignity. We want to make sure we're using the least restrictive interventions and that they're safe and effective. We want to make sure they're applicable to many settings and environments, and it's based off some evidence-based procedures. And this is something that once a year I'll go and get recertification, and then all our staff are also recertified once a year. So the goals of safety care is you want to create a positive, supportive, and rich physical and social environment. So those are things such as making sure kids' basic needs are met, making sure there's a classroom that's uncluttered, there's not a lot of noises or stressors or things that could agitate kids. Making sure we are teaching functional alternatives to challenging behaviors. So making sure that those kids who might have some challenges, we're giving them replacement behaviors and alternatives instead of the behaviors that we're seeing. We want to prevent crises whenever possible. We want to make sure we're managing them safely and therapeutically. We want to try to minimize the intensity and duration of the behavior crises, and then decreasing the future likelihood of behavior crises. So the goal is that when we have all these things in place, we'll see less and less incidents occurring with our students. So the topics that I teach are, so it starts with conditions related to challenging behaviors. And those could be things such as psychiatric conditions. It could be neurological conditions that includes autism, traumatic brain injury, intellectual disability. It could also be things such as any medical, physical conditions that they may have. I mean, it could be things where kids are coming to school hungry or they're not feeling good, and all those things can impact them and if they're just in their ability to function, and then it could cause them to have behavior. So these are all things that we teach and we talk about, and we want staff to look for. Other important factors related to challenging behaviors we talk about are things such as, a person's history. Have they been exposed to trauma, or are they from a divorced family? Are they living with grandparents? Just all those different things that we think about in the kid's life that could impact them and could have them show some challenging behaviors. And then we also look at the ABC of behavior. So that is the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So the antecedent is what happens before we see a behavior. So what is causing them to have this behavior? And then the behavior is obviously what they're displaying. And then the consequence is, what are they getting out of the behavior? Are they escaping a task they don't want to do? Are they getting attention from staff? Are they getting attention from peers? So different things like that. We talk about those things to see where the behaviors are coming from, because we really need to know where the behaviors are coming from so we can figure out how to address them. And then looking at reinforcement. So, reinforcement is something that follows the behavior that reinforces it. So whatever consequence we're giving, then we're reinforcing that behavior. And we have to look at how the behavior is maintained through the reinforcement. And sometimes, so you'll see it says the behavioral trap. So sometimes we inadvertently reinforce behaviors that we don't want to. So, a kid might be doing something and we might say something or give them something real quick because we want it to end. And then in the end, we end up actually reinforcing what we don't want to reinforce. So we talk about those different things to figure out, how we can help decrease the challenging behaviors without inadvertently reinforcing it. We also look at staff behavior. So I really wanted staff to look at how they react to the kids. How are you speaking to them? What does your verbal behavior look like? Or, your physical behavior? Are you posturing? You're most of the times when it's younger kids that have behaviors, and then you're, grown up, you're bigger and, you're intimidating. So just really looking at how we present ourselves to the students, and then also looking at, power struggles. So that's a big thing of teaching. Like we need staff to recognize we don't want to engage in power struggles with our students. We don't want to take things personally. So recognizing how we're reacting to their behaviors, so we're not reinforcing it, we're making things worse. We also look at de-escalation. So the things we teach are help, prompt, and wait. So those are our 3 de-escalation strategies that we use throughout the building. So the help is when a student is in a crisis, and it might be just kind of a low-level crisis, we teach them to ask, what do you need? How can I help? We never try to say things or give them answers to things that they might need. We really want them to tell us. We don't want to assume we know what they need. And then prompting them. We might prompt them to ask for something they want. And then wait. And wait is something that we use a lot. So a lot of times the wait strategy is that we're kind of just waiting them out. So it kind of stands for, why am I talking? So a lot of times when a student is really escalated, they just need that time to de-escalate. So we teach staff that sometimes you have to recognize they just need quiet. So we just need to sit back, wait, make sure everybody's safe, but kind of just wait it out. And then the last thing we talk about is physical management. So this would be something that would only be used in an extreme case where we feel like that if we did not intervene, then the child would be at risk to be injured, or somebody would get hurt, things like that. So if we feel like safety is an issue and we feel like we cannot keep them safe or anybody else safe, then we would resort to physical management. And that would be something that if a child was put in a restraint, we would, fill out a documentation, let parents know, and then typically have a meeting to discuss, what happened and how we could do things better in the end and things like that. And then we always want to make sure if we do that, that we do as a staff debrief and talk about, what worked, what didn't work, and how we might change things differently next time.
Any questions with any of that? That was a lot.
That was a lot, sorry. So then currently we have 31 staff that are trained. So we have 2 learning support / emotional support teachers at Marlboro, 1 RBT, 1 specialist, and 1 guidance counselor. At Hereford, we have 2 autistic support teachers, 2 RBTs, 1 learning support teacher, 1 counselor, 1 psychologist. 4-5 has 1 autistic support, 2 learning support, 1 counselor, 1 RBT, and then 1 autistic support paraprofessional. The middle school has 2 learning support teachers, 1 emotional support teacher, a student assistance counselor, and then 1 regular education teacher. And then the high school, we have 1 autistic support teacher, a life skills teacher, a psychologist, 1 RBT, we have 3 counselors, and then 1 paraprofessional that are currently certified.
All right. So our registered behavior technicians, which is again the acronym for RBT or the meaning for RBT. And we'll just sort of review what that is for those that may not be familiar. I know this is over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion, and I know a number of you are all aware of this even prior to my returning to the district. So an RBT is really just a paraprofessional who is certified in specific areas of behavior analysis. And really the goal is to assist and service students. So the RBT supervisor, which is a required element to have RBTs working and supporting students within the district. And that is Matt Hook, our 0.5 BCBA. And he provides direct supervision for them. And it is a minimum of that 5% of their monthly hours. So it typically looks like it's about 6 hours a month where he is physically in their classroom working with them, throughout that time to support and supervise and assist them. And it really is all in regards to questions that they might have, all for the area of behavior and supporting students. And then their certification requirements are that ongoing, and it's got to be monthly. It's documented, all of that information. There is an RBT ethics code, completion of the RBT competency assessment annually. So initially, to get the initial certification, they had to go through that whole piece of the competencies. And then annually, they'll do that with Matt, and they'll go through that, as well as just there's that annual renewal showing all of that information for them to continue on. And a lot of their daily responsibilities, and I will share, it could change at a moment's notice, but these are just some of the things that they do in our buildings. They'll work and support and gather data collection. So as we mentioned a little bit about the MTSS piece, a lot of that has to do with the data collection to determine where that student is and when those actual behaviors are occurring and the frequency. They'll collect that, what we call the ABC data, and they'll assist and they'll work closely with Matt and Missy in regards to reviewing that data. And that really, I think, supports our gen ed teachers as well as our special ed teachers. And then implementing, some naturalistic teaching procedures, which is that incidental teaching. Just working with them naturally, not necessarily planned instruction, and that's throughout their school day. Token systems have to do with that positive reinforcement for students. They are frequently, and most of them, if not all of them, are members of our building crisis teams. And then they have learned a lot of different strategies in the area of differential reinforcement. So currently in Upper Perk School District, we have 6 certified RBTs that are supporting our students. And we have 1 RBT in training, and she's actually at the 4-5 building, and she's coming towards the end of her training and expected to receive her certification in June. So then we would have, for the 21-22 school year, we would have 7 RBTs. Currently, we have 1 at Marlborough working with our learning support, emotional support teacher at Hereford, and at the 4-5, we have 2 at Hereford, and we have 1 at the 4-5 building, and they are supporting mainly the autistic support classrooms. And then at the high school, we have 1 in our autistic support program, as well as 1 in our emotional support program right now. So we want to talk about some of the areas we're thinking of. Nothing is necessarily confirmed at this point, but just to where we are coming to the end of April of 2021 and looking at 21-22 and potential areas we want to continue to support teachers and students in, and some things. So Amy, Amy's going to share.
Could I ask a question before you move on to the next step?
Absolutely.
Could you go back to the last slide?
Yes.
Or the slide before that?
Oh, the one before this?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we have 6 RBTs on site, is that right? 6?
Correct.
Okay, and their manager, the supervisor is a consultant from the MCIU?
Correct.
And he's half-time?
Yeah, he's 0.5 here. So
how does that work if they're here full-time and he's not on site and he's not available and there's an issue? I'm just thinking about managerially how that works.
So Dr. Teller is also, so her being a behavior specialist, she can work with them. She does not have the BCBA credential. So
Okay.
It's not that she doesn't have the skill set, it's the BCBA credential that's required.
And then just to add to what Andrea is saying, and Missy as well, Missy, you can add to it too. As I had shared on, I think it was this screen. hold on, let me go back. Right here. So there are a required amount of hours monthly for supervision, and that is approximately 6 hours. So during Matt's 2.5 days, if you want to look at it that way, where he's physically, or he's working with our staff, those hours are all occurring during those time periods. I think what you might be asking is, and I agree with you, if and when, let's say on a Tuesday when Matt is not here, and there may be a crisis or a behavioral incident where we need supports, just as Andrea had said, that would be at any time, whether it's Missy or Matt. And a lot of times at our elementary level, it is Missy really working with those programs and supports.
And I can clarify too. So a lot of the stuff that Matt does is there's like a checklist every time he meets with the RBT. So he has to go over the specific skills for the RBT as far as the applied behavior analysis, or specific skills that he looks for when he supervises them. But as far as like the behavior plans and, like Carol said, crisis and stuff like that, that is stuff that all work with our RBTs and the special education teachers on the plans for those type of things. And Matt and I speak, we have monthly or weekly meetings. Every Wednesday we meet, and then we talk during the week also when he's in the building. But even the suggestions that he goes over with the RBTs, we always then meet as a team to go over so that we're all kind of on the same page.
And just to add, they're district employees, so obviously they're supervised by building administration, special education administration, and things like that.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Dr. Drake?
somewhat. It's just still a little. I'm just not used to how. I guess if it's a sort of matrix reporting somehow, then at least they have a supervisor somewhere if something happens.
And just for a point of clarity, Dr. Drake, Chris McCluskey
Mhm.
was when we started with RBTs, Chris McCluskey was here and had the BCBA credential.
Mhm.
So when Chris left, obviously we didn't
Yes.
hiring a 1.0 BCBA. Although I will contend to you, 1.5 behavioral specialists for a district with the kind of programs we have is very, very sparse. If I can throw my 2 cents in. But that's sort of how that transition happened. When we started the training, Chris McCluskey was here. She left during the midst of that training, and we needed to contract with the MCIU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't seem like an optimal thing. I mean, it seems you're making do, but if it's Judy's committee also, not mine, but I mean, if we think we need more, we should talk about it. If two
I
is
think
the
it's
right
a function
number.
of the budget. It was a recommendation for a 1.0 BCBA, but we understand the limitations of our budget presently, especially in the area of personnel. So, that was going to be a 1.0 district funded person. However, due to where we are, our maintenance of a 0.5 MCIU BCBA, was the outcome.
Yeah, I don't want to get on a soapbox again, but maybe I will. If we have a culture of scarcity that we don't think we have the budget for certain things, we really, we need to watch that. If we need this, we should really have an honest conversation about if we need it and then put it in the budget.
Well, and I think,
My opinion.
adding all teachers for full day K sort of bumped everything else.
Okay. Understood. Okay.
But Dr. Drake, during the 21-22 school year, just like Andrea just said, I'll throw in another 2 cents. We can continue to share and provide you with information. What very likely, I think we feel strongly, and Missy would probably just looking at her schedule every day, it potentially is a definite need. All right, so sorry, Amy.
Thank you for answering that question. The first one, not the next 3. Sorry.
So next steps. So obviously I spoke to you about the things that we did throughout the course of this school year. Obviously, we want to continue with those things. We have Missy, who will continue to provide the individual and small group professional development, whether it's coordinated during professional development days or just as needed as things happen. Patan, as Carol mentioned, we will be resubmitting an application in June to continue for our supports for our autistic support and MDS programs. And actually our last session, our last PD session with our teachers will be an end of the year wrap up, getting them ready to, wrap things up this year so that they're ready to go next school year. Again, MCIU project consultant, same situation. We will continue to work with them to support our teachers in understanding the FBA process and developing positive behavior support plans. And, again, anything else that sort of comes up that we feel that our district could benefit from their support as well. And then, as Carol mentioned, we meet monthly with all of our teachers for group meetings in all of our buildings. And then we do have one-to-one meetings with our teachers where they're able to identify student-specific concerns, questions, and many times there are behavior concerns. Missy's part of that, so we will continue to do that as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, at those monthly meetings, our building school psychologists are at all of those meetings, as well as our speech therapists. So next steps for QBS and RBT services. So just looking at where we are currently, some of the things, again, not fully determined yet. We're not at the end of the school year, but obviously to continue to provide those initial QBS certifications. We are looking at potentially, in a perfect world, to have one building administrator also certified as well, just because typically if there is an area of need and a crisis team typically is called, we feel strongly it's very important that the lead in that building, which is the administrator, also has that background information. To continue, obviously, for this school year, due to the pandemic, certifications have been extended until the end of June 2021. But we're already working, not waiting for that time to get a lot of our staff already recertified. So they're good to go at the end of the school year and ready for next year. We're also looking at, and this is a lot of discussion too with Missy as well. We talked about providing a PD session for our general education teachers, special education teachers at the 4-5. Looking at adding a certification for additional staff potentially in 21-22, which would include some of our gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, and then also paraprofessionals. But this is not, because a number of our teachers don't necessarily need the full complete certification, which, as Missy can share, the second half of the training really goes into potentially if there's a need for some physical supports to support the student. This would be the beginning half, and the whole focus, and again, Missy, you can add to this, is really based on de-escalation, support strategies and interventions, which I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree. This is critical for everybody. And Missy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean,
to that.
I just think it's something that sometimes a lot, the regular education staff or other people that maybe aren't QBS certified, sometimes they wonder like why we're doing the things we're doing or saying the things we're saying. So I think it'd be great skills, even just for classroom management for teachers to have, so that they can head off the problems in their classrooms initially before it could turn into a bigger issue. So a lot of times if they had these de-escalation strategies and knew these interventions, things might, be not such a big deal, and things could be, the teachers will be able to have the skills to de-escalate before they would have to call the crisis team, or we would have to intervene in other ways. So I think having those skills for them is very important. And then they understand too, the language that we're using.
Can I plug in for- Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
Just a quick question. It sounds like some kind of basic training might be useful. Like I know in industry, I think about Six Sigma black belts. Sometimes there's trainings that are for managers, or so you get a sprinkling of the principles without being certified in it, but at least the language and the basic principles. I don't know if QBS has anything like that with their training or not, but maybe that would be useful.
So they do. So we've done trainings where we kind of briefly talk about like the help, prompt, wait, and certain de-escalation strategies or certain types of reinforcement. And you don't have to necessarily be certified, but you can do sections 1 to 4, and you can be certified in de-escalation and interventions, things like that. So there's kind of an option to do either one. You could do kind of, like you said, a sprinkling, or you could actually certify them in all the concepts up until physical management.
My question was also if it might be helpful if we had professional development for everyone, and what kind of time would that take?
So Missy, you can add to this, but I will just add, so as a QBS trainer, and Missy is our district only trainer in the district, and they typically will permit per training session up to 10 individuals. So then when you look at that piece and then you look at the time, and Missy, you can correct me, is it about between 4 and 6 hours for that initial those?
Yeah, so if you're just going to do those initial sections, yeah, it's about 4 to 6 hours to go over those and role play and make sure they really have the competencies. And yeah, like Carol said, so I was able to train up to 10 people at a time.
So I do want to make a point of clarity. Our intention will never, ever be to certify everyone in QBS.
Right.
No one should be putting their hands on children. It was a universal practice in this district, and it is grossly inappropriate for staff to be putting their hands on children. And so we identify people and we train them, we certify them, and we recertify them annually. You know, because there are requirements, legal requirements for reporting every time you place your hands on children. And so when we talk about, and we have as a district for the last 5 years, provided universal training for staff in de-escalation, verbal de-escalation, but never, ever, ever will we universally train people to put their hands on kids. It's just not a practice that we want to relive in Upper Perk. You know, as you can imagine, it's a very sensitive situation for both the adult, the child, and the child's family. And so if you are trained, and, you know, many of us, actually, I think all of us on this, you know, administrative team here on this call are trained and have had to use restraint on children. It's emotional. It's not easy to put your hands on children. So that's, I just want to be clear when we're talking about QBS, that is a very specific training for a very specific population of people who we call on in those circumstances. All the intermediary steps that Missy talked about, we have and we will continue to provide training for classroom teachers and administrators on how to de-escalate a situation, or sometimes, you know, we have to even make staff aware of things like tone, eye contact, body positioning, all of those things for kids who have sensory needs or conduct disorders or emotional disturbances are triggers or could be triggers. And so it's a delicate line, you know, and I think we always try to provide the staff universally training on those types of things, but never sort of the whole buffet of QBS training and the certification.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that we'd have everybody in the world.
No.
Well,
Melanie, before,
good.
when I got here, almost every single person was.
Yep.
I was trained in QBS.
I know. Well, so the nurse is a unique position, Judy. You know?
Yes, you're right. I mean, there was, I remember that there were office staff that had gone through QBS. So,
And if you remember,
Yeah,
and
that was
nurses
the dark
tend to be
ages.
part of crisis teams for a lot of reasons, you know, so.
and prior to QBS, if you all, maybe you're more familiar with CPI, I think that's what, prior to the QBS moving, we did have some here that was doing that. I think I had been a trainer as well as CPI. I think Andrea, you were as well. Yeah. And Missy, were you?
Anymore.
So we all were with those, and that, you are right, going back to that time, it was everybody that thought was certification, when in reality, I think what we're just talking about here is more of the de-escalation, which is just benefits everybody, and whether we do it just as PD, as Andrea is talking about, all of those areas. We have been and will continue to support teachers in those areas.
Okay.
I will say, and if I can just sort of add some context too, I think culture and climate play a huge role. You know, at the elementary level, positive behavioral supports is that whole tier one. So when you think about training for staff collectively, when we talk about PBIS and we talk about school-wide positive supports, that's the universal training that we try to get to all staff. And so, you know, we have done that at all of our K-5 buildings. The push now is to create that climate and culture, that tier one, if we're thinking about MTSS, 6 through 12. There's a lot of work to do in that area, but it is really fundamentally at the core of, you know, this is all the way at the end. What we're talking about tonight is at the end of that continuum. But school-wide positive behavioral supports, PBIS, is the first step. And so, you know, that's the district. And I will tell you, our principals at the elementary level have embraced it. And you can see, you know, I talk about the climate data and how kids know, you know, people care about me, you know, people treat me well. That's all a reflection of behavioral support. And so, you know, you'll hear us continue to push at the secondary level that the same type of tier one positive behavioral supports needs to be in place at the middle and high school, where we're not seeing that growth in our climate data as we have seen in the elementary schools.
And we're
Okay.
pretty fortunate too. Our project consultant from the MCIU, well, she is our PBS facilitator as well as, so our teachers K-5, they are all familiar and know her, which is great. She's also the one leading the behavioral supports that we've done throughout the year, professional development. So, which is really nice. It's the same individual. For RBTs.
I just want to be clear. I wasn't suggesting that everybody should be trained in restraint. I thought it was more conceptually. So I would not, as a parent of a child with special needs, I would not want that to be done. Anyone that's not completely enrolled and trained.
Yeah, and I just clarify that because you'll never see QBS universally, because at the end of that is that whole physical component of it. But some of the initial techniques are definitely part of that.
Okay.
So to wrap up there, the RBT supports and services. So as you're aware, and I showed on a prior slide where we currently have those RBTs working in buildings and with the programs. And hopefully in June of 2021, we will have 7 RBTs that are trained. So coming up to next school year, which we typically will do any school year, we'll review and monitor really currently the programs those RBTs are supporting. And then really assignments if at certain buildings, like you may have noticed currently this school year, we do not have an RBT at our middle school. So that's really just our annual review of everything and really the upcoming school year where it is strong need to have those RBT support. So that's just data we'll look at moving forward. Questions, thoughts, discussion?
Anybody have any questions on that?
I would just say that I feel like we're in a lot better position than we used to be.
I'd say that's pretty accurate.
I agree.
No more questions on behavioral supports, because if not, we can move on to the next agenda item. So last chance.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Twice.
Appreciate that. That was really helpful discussion.
All right. So if we don't have any more questions for that, thank you, Missy and Amy and Carol. We really appreciate that. That was a great, nice overview of QBS. Even for somebody who, you know, had it a few years ago, it was nice to see. It looks like it's changed even a little bit since I took it 6 or 7 years ago, however long ago that was. So the next thing on our agenda is the 2021 PA Climate Survey reminders. So,
yeah, and this is just an infomercial.
yeah.
You know, so at our last meeting, we talked about, you know, staff being being surveyed. So they completed those surveys in March. And then over the course of the next several weeks, I added the dates and the locations of when those surveys will be conducted. And so, you know, we hope to have those results. We'll share them hopefully at our first meeting in September. But we get them done at this time just so we can write additional grants over the summer in full. We use that, and we utilize this data to program with the county in terms of support services. So, you know, I always want to take a public forum so parents know that that's coming up in the next couple weeks. They've tried to integrate it in on either a Wednesday or in a exploratory type of class that involves a computer, so the teachers are there to help the kids. And then I'm looking to put that out in the town and country in May. So, you know, we'll try and run 2 ads in May to see if we can capture those folks who are not, you know, do not have children in the district, just to ask what their stakeholder feedback is. So that's coming. And you know, I referenced it in the results just because the climate survey and the PACE survey truly are interwoven in all of the initiatives the district has in the area of academic success, as well as MTSS, as well as supporting student behavior. And so, you know, these are fundamentally data points that we utilize to be able to describe how kids are feeling about school, in school, you know, what their protective factors are, what their risk factors are, how they feel that the school supports them and teachers support them. And so, you know, it's incredibly valuable data that, you know, I really encourage everyone to participate in, although it is completely voluntary. So that is the caveat. So, you know, hopefully we can do it again, Judy, in September, because those are, you know, and the PACE survey will also happen next year. So we'll have that data, not in September, but hopefully by the end of the year. So those are 2 really good metrics for us to look at in terms of climate and culture in the district.
So I have a quick question for you, Dr. Farina. So the staff survey was completed at the end of March. Do you have a ballpark? I'm not looking for a number, but a ballpark about how many of our staff completed it? Like 50%, 25%?
So it ranges by building. Our elementary schools are at 100%, basically,
Awesome.
of staff participants. Our middle school's about at 80%, and our high school, they always need a little extra encouragement. You know, so they were at about 60%. It doesn't close. So I've asked the principals of our secondary schools to try again. We don't see who the individuals are. It is anonymous. So the principals sort of just repeat the hounding. And then after the student surveys are done, then I'll run all the results. So they won't be able to complete it after that. So I do have it open through the next 2 weeks, so principals can try to encourage whoever out there didn't complete it yet. But those are good numbers.
Yeah.
Elementary is notorious for, our teachers always do it. When we ask them, they do it. So, you know, we'll continue to encourage the middle and high school teachers to get that done as well.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Farina on this survey? Just to get it on the record in case anybody watches the video. So the student survey, which as we remind you, is passive consent. If you don't want your child to take it, you just need to let your building principal know. Is that correct, Dr. Farina? They let the building principal. So Hereford will be the week of May 17th in flight class. Marlboro, the same thing during flight class. And 4-5. So all 3 of them, the students will take that in flight class the week of the 17th. The middle school will complete it on 4/13, and the high school is going to be incorporating it whenever they can into classes that involve the computer, you said. So
yeah, well, so the high school's on the student survey's on 5/5. So they will
okay.
Wednesday. Yep. It's the flight class. They do it in the elementary school in flight because they're already sort of digitally connected at that moment.
Okay. So is 5-5 a Wednesday?
No, that should probably say, yeah, no, 5-5 is a Wednesday, yeah. 5-3.
Will that be their attendance for the day? No, just,
Probably.
well, but then you'd know who did it, so you.
Yeah, we don't know. It's totally anonymous.
Right. So, all right. Anybody have any questions? Moving on is just a reminder, I think, about the parent trainings. Sabrina, so.
Our next parent training is May 6th. We're running 2 sessions, one from 12 to 1 and one from 5:30 to 6 via Zoom. And it is on the Autism Initiative and intensive teaching. So I don't know, Carol, if you want to add anything to that.
It's just to make sure it's going out on our Friday blast. It'll go out one more time this Friday. It's on the website. It's out on Facebook. It's on Twitter. Our teachers have been made aware of it. So hopefully they'll share with families. So hopefully, we'll have a good number for attendance.
And it will be provided by the 2 consultants that work with our teachers. So they are the ones that will be providing the training.
Are those the consultants from Patan?
Yes.
IU, right, okay. All right. Great. So, well, that completes our agenda for today. 8 minutes early, woohoo. So, any overall questions? Anybody have anything that they'd like us to look at next month that you feel you'd like some more information on? Dana, Carrie, Melanie? No?
Is there, maybe we could talk about like the types of grants and things that we look for? Is that something?
Oh, grants?
Yeah.
Sure. We do a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
All right, well, any members of the audience have anything they'd like to say? You can just unmute, we're casual here. No? Okay, well, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Since I'm the only other committee member, it's got to be me.
That's what I'm like, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn, Dr. Brink.
Okay.
And I will second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys. That was a wonderful
Thank you.
presentation.
It was.
Yeah, thank
That was
you.
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful.
Will that be on the SharePoint? Share in case anybody wants to see it? Great.
Yep, absolutely.
Because it
Great.
is a good PowerPoint there. So
Yep. That's a lot of information.
we'll see you next month.
Okay.
Excellent.
Have a good night.
Have a good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good one.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.